Welcome to Hyde Abbey, the final resting place of King Alfred the Great. It lies just north of the ancient walled city of Winchester and was built in the early 12th century. It was one of the largest abbeys in the whole Kingdom of England, and after 400 years was almost entirely demolished. But now we can reimagine what it was like in its heyday. My name is Walter de Aston. I was abbot here for more than 20 years, in the first half of the 13th century. Here, we are outside the abbey's west gate, used by visitors and pilgrims for centuries. It's the main entrance to the abbey. It's going to be my privilege to take you inside and show you around, so you can see at first hand its layout, the way of life we lead, our work, our study, and our prayer, all lived according to St. Benedict, whose rule we followed. Here's the forecourt of the abbey, a place of great gathering for visitors, pilgrims, and local people connected with the monastery. With such numbers, you inevitably get some cut purses and others up to no good. So we provide security to make the faithful and the abbey feel safe. From here, we can get a good long view down the forecourt to the west end of the abbey church. It's a very fine building, as you'll appreciate when we get a little closer. It evolved over time, as did the whole of the abbey precincts, and it was surrounded by a number of other buildings to meet the varied needs of the community, from brewing beer to looking after the infirm. The abbey church is not the only church within the abbey precincts. If you look across to your left, you'll see the little lay chapel, which serves the local folk and servants of the abbey. It was built at the same time as the abbey itself, but was a very modest building. It's known now as St. Bartholomew's, and it's grown and expanded over the years. Even when it was small, though, it had this lovely carved doorway. Isn't that beautiful? And look to your right. That is the external wall of the Almoners' Hall. This is where the abbey reaches out to feed travellers and the poor. You'll see more of this later on. To get to the Almoners' Hall, you have to pass through this gateway to the outer court. And this is one of the few abbey buildings which has survived the tests of time. Now, as you can see, as we approach the abbey church, there's a bridge looming up over the Hyde Stream. Bourne is a word from my time. This land, both sides of the stream, was given to the Abbot of Hyde in a swap for land in the centre of the city, occupied by New Minster, very close to where the cathedral is today. It was an enormous effort to move the community of monks and all their treasures, including the remains of 3 Anglo-Saxon kings, from New Minster to Hyde. But it did mean we had more land for our abbey, and it was far healthier than being cooped up in the centre of the city. Let's just stand for a moment to admire the beauty of this west front of the abbey church. It's impressed everyone who's ever seen it. And think of all the important people, kings, bishops, representatives of the Pope and others, who would have passed through it over the years. Even Henry VIII's top agent, Thomas Wriothesley, 1st Earl of Southampton, who arrived in 1538 to pull the church down. So here we are now, just inside the west door of the church, looking down the nave. Pretty remarkable, isn't it? And striking how long it is. Apart from the cathedral, it's the longest church in Hampshire. Like all great buildings, it has changed and been reshaped over time. When it was built originally, it was probably to the standard model of a Benedictine monastery you'd find in Normandy, for instance. As you walk down the nave towards the east end and the high altar, we can admire the fine carving in the columns and arches of this great church. The stone from which it was built was brought from several different places, and the trained eye can distinguish its actual source. Quarries on the Isle of Wight, from Portland in Dorset, and even some from Caen in northern France. Just think how much work that involved. It's the skill of those stonemasons that we admire today. It is here in the choir that we monks gather regularly, throughout the day and night, for prayer and praise to the Lord our God. Although we also study and do manual work, this is where our most important task is undertaken. Living in an atmosphere of silence, seeking to be constantly attentive to God's presence. Our aim is simply to create harmony between prayer and work. These 2 side chapels host some of our most valuable and revered relics. This one is the shrine dedicated to St. Josh, or St. Judoc as he's sometimes called. His bones were brought across from France at around the time that the new minster was founded. St. Jos is celebrated everywhere. Even the famous wife of Bath swears by him. And here we have a shrine dedicated to St. Valentine. You know all about him, I'm sure. Many years ago, the wife of King Canute, he was really a Viking, gave us his arm, obtained, I don't know how, from the Holy Land. We cherish St. Valentine for all his great sanctity, but many others love him too, probably for different reasons. Now we are entering the holiest part of the church, the sanctuary. Look at the high altar, resplendent in all its glory, and crowned by this fantastic cross given to the new minster by King Canute. As well as being made of solid gold, it was covered with magnificent jewels. Sadly, in 1141 it melted down in a fire we had here, but some years later a replacement was made, the replacement we had on the altar when I was abbot here. Here also are the royal graves of King Alfred, his wife Elswith, and his son King Edward the Elder. He was the king who actually built Newminster. We revere them as important people and would have liked to have known more about King Alfred himself. After all, he had died a long time ago, and he's still the only English king to be called great. We never opened the graves, but I imagine there will be plenty of wonderful jewels in there to honour that greatness. We are leaving the church now. Enter the cloisters. This is the place for tranquil reflection, exercise and exchange with our fellow monks. It gives the community the opportunity for fresh air and privacy without having to be exposed to the world and its many temptations. We can simply sit, read or reflect in peace. When our predecessors built this abbey all those years ago, they took pleasure in decorating the capitals on the top of these columns with lots of amusing images. Here, for example, is a pair of monks with very nice haircuts, don't you think? Here are fantastic beasts of some strange origin that seem to be eating a low-hanging delicacy with great relish. This is my favourite. See the upturned face of the man? What is he doing with a fountain erupting from his mouth? One of the features that makes us monks different from most other men is that we are literate. We can read and we can write. So writing and copying of manuscripts is a very important part of the working day for many of our monks. And this is where our writing is done, the scriptorium or writing place. Aren't we well organised? In the scriptorium, we keep our library, including many copies of the sacred texts. We also have detailed records of everything connected with the administration of the abbey, charters recording land grants, land ownership, and so on. But what is special to us is our book of life, the Liber Vitae, which lists all the people associated with the abbey, the monks and brothers, donors, the kings, all for whom we pray to be among the saved on that final day of judgment. Here is a monk adding new names to the Liber Vitae. The book has a marvellous illustration of the saints rising to be with God and the damned being pushed down to spend eternity tortured by the devil. A lesson perhaps for all of us? There is also a wonderful picture of King Canute with his wife Emma presenting the gold cross to Newminster. And one day maybe you'll be able to see it for yourselves. Another very significant text held in the scriptorium is the Liber de Hyde, the Book of Hyde. This contains many important documents, including both chronicles of the history of the Anglo-Saxon kings and also more charters and legal documents linked to the ownership of land by the abbey. But maybe the most important document of all is the will of King Alfred the Great, which gives us an insight into the personal wealth and life of that important king. It's time for you to come outside and see how we feed ourselves in the abbey. I mentioned when we were in the Frater that mostly we monks had a vegetarian diet, but I should add that along with vegetables, we also eat a lot of fish, primarily pike and tench. And that's because we have the Hyde Bourne running through our abbey, very convenient. And here, just off the stream, we have 2 large fish ponds. These are very important to us, and we look after the ponds and the fish very carefully. If we didn't, then we would be living on beans and root vegetables every day, and I think that would be rather bland. We are now moving back across the stream into the more public areas of the abbey precincts. As well as supplying water to the fish ponds and being a useful boundary, the river is of vital importance to the day-to-day running of the abbey. It's a source of power for our mill, but it's also a way of clearing out rubbish and waste. Here you can see our mill, which grinds the corn brought in from the surrounding fields, and our home farm, a short distance away at Abbots Barton. And beyond that, you can see we have a guest house. Again, it's set over the stream. Why? Well, I'll leave that to your imagination. We're now starting to come to the end of our tour. Across there, on the other side of the outer court, you can see the gateway, which we passed when we started our journey. But now, of course, we are on the inside of it, and the building we're heading for, as our last port of call, stands just to the left of it. It's the Almoner's Hall. All monasteries are required to have an Almoner's Hall, and we are no different. It's a place where we can give our hospitality to strangers, wandering pilgrims, to any guest who presents themselves. They are all welcome, but especially to the poor and forsaken. Large crowds can gather here, waiting to be fed. A day doesn't pass without us providing food, shelter and comfort to men, women and children alike. And now we are back where we started from. There is St. Bartholomew's little chapel again. Perhaps you'd care to stop off briefly for some prayer and reflection before you go. No? Oh well, maybe next time. I know that you are busy. So, let's go back up to our west gate. Well, it's been a real pleasure to escort you round our fine historic abbey. I do hope that you've enjoyed your time here and that you will be inspired to learn more about our monastery, the final resting place of our beloved King Alfred the Great. May God go with you.